So I think this is an existential threat to this guy's life. And let's not pretend that Donald Trump can't pick the phone up to President of El Salvador. Of course he can. They're paying millions of dollars.
Piers Morgan was a guest on Bill Maher's show Real Time, and this was a rare instance of Piers Morgan actually being critical of Donald Trump. Usually Piers Morgan is sucking up to him, but in this case he did not. We're going to see exactly why. Josiah from Pondering Politics broke all this down. We're going to take a look at clips of him. I'm going to share my thoughts on this as well. Let's get into it together.
On the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, even the usually Trump sycophantic Piers Morgan was visibly fed up and called out Donald Trump and the Trump administration for their cruelty, their lack of respect for due process, and their dishonesty when it came to the unlawful deportation of Abrego Garcia, and we have to talk about it. All right, friends, as you know, Piers Morgan styles himself as a nonpartisan, principled journalist, goes straight down the middle, but more often than not, far more often than not, he grades Donald Trump on a curve. He holds Donald Trump to lower standards with respect to integrity and honesty and principle than he does the Democratic Party. And if you look at his, Piers Morgan Uncensored episodes, if you look at his writings for the New York Post, his appearances on Fox News, his Twitter page, it's very obvious he grades Trump on a curve, which is as far from principled and nonpartisan as you could possibly be. But every now and then, even Piers Morgan gets fed up with the excesses of Donald Trump and the Trump administration. And so we've got a lot to talk about because there has been some updates with the Abrego Garcia case. But first, I want to show you a clip of even Piers Morgan calling out Trump and the Trump administration about all this.
The key problem with this is the lack of due process, and it's coming back to haunt the administration. Because when you get a guy like this who, according to a ruling in a court in 2019, was not supposed to be deported back to El Salvador because of the risk to his life from other gangs, we haven't heard from this. We don't know where he is in this prison. Is he alive? Is he going to stay alive? Will the gangs that were threatening him enough for a U.S. court to say he should not be deported back there, will they get to him? So I think this is an existential threat to this guy's life. And let's not pretend that Donald Trump can't pick the phone up to President of El Salvador. Of course he can. They're paying millions of dollars to facilitate these guys being put into prison.
And the whole Supreme Court unanimously said, so let's hope that happens.
And they said he has rights, habeas corpus rights. Human beings have rights, even illegal aliens, even alleged terrorists, even alleged gangsters. They have human rights. We don't give them human rights. They're born with them. They're innate.
Some of them are.
So that was Josh Rogin from the Washington Post. He is a foreign policy writer for the Washington Post. But again, Piers Morgan seems fed up, especially with the Trump administration's excuses. The guy's in El Salvador now. We don't have any jurisdiction over El Salvador. As if Donald Trump, as Piers Morgan and others have noted, couldn't just pick up the phone and either bargain with or demand that Bukele, who is the president of El Salvador, return Abrego Garcia. So with that in mind, having established that even Piers Morgan finds this deplorable and is calling out the Trump administration for their cruelty, their lack of respect for due process, and their dishonesty with respect to apparently how they have no control, they have no ability to influence Bukele and the El Salvadoran government to return Abrego Garcia, let's look into the most recent developments. Because as Bill Maher mentioned, and we did a video about this with friend of the show, Pisco, the Supreme Court unanimously, even Alito and Thomas and Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, even the 6-3 conservative supermajority, joined with the liberals to reaffirm that people who are deported out of this country, even under the Alien Enemies Act and others, have a right to due process and habeas rights in particular. That was unanimously confirmed. And they also effectively ordered the Trump administration to obey a lower court order, a district court order, saying that Abrego Garcia had to be returned. But what happened since then? Let's take a look. CNN writes about this. Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported. In a tense hearing, the Department of Justice wouldn't say where he is. What happens next? This isn't good. Less than a day after the Supreme Court said the Trump administration had to facilitate the return of a man mistakenly deported to El Salvador, the case appeared headed for even murkier waters. During a tense hearing before U.S. District Judge Paula Zinnes on Friday afternoon, Justice Department Attorney Drew Ensign repeatedly stonewalled the judge as she sought to nail down details about the steps the administration is taking to secure the return of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, at one point even admitting he had no information to provide on exactly where the Maryland father of three currently is. Quote, "I'm not asking for state secrets," Zinnes said after Ensign told her he didn't have basic details on where Abrego Garcia is. Quote, "I'm asking a very simple question. Where is he?" Quote, "There is no evidence today as to where he is today," the judge said later. Quote, "That is extremely troubling." Zinnes on Friday ordered the Justice Department to provide daily updates on what the administration is doing to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia, but it remains unclear whether the reports would prove satisfactory to either the court or the lawyers representing Abrego Garcia and his family. The judge did not say what would happen if she didn't like the answers. Here's what to know about the case. The Trump administration has conceded that it mistakenly deported him, quote, because of an administrative error, but maintains it cannot bring him back because he is in Salvadorian custody. Abrego Garcia was granted protected status by an immigration judge in 2019 under the Trump administration that prohibited the federal government from sending him to El Salvador. His attorneys say he fled gang violence in El Salvador more than a decade ago. That is one of the things Piers Morgan referenced. Abrego Garcia had been identified by his wife in a photo of detainees entering intake at El Salvador's notorious mega prison last month. Officials with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement say he is a member of MS-13, which the Trump administration has designated as a foreign terrorist organization. Zinnes had initially ordered the administration to return Abrego Garcia to the U.S. last Friday, calling the mistaken deportation an illegal act and setting a midnight April 7th deadline.
Before Pondering Politics gets into the next part, I wanted to say that just today there was a story where a man who was born in the United States, his family went to Mexico when he was 1. So he's a U.S. citizen, born here. They moved to Mexico. At some point, he came back. I'm not sure from the article when it was that he came back to the United States. He was in the United States, got pulled over for some kind of a traffic violation, didn't speak English. Police officer arrested him. ICE detained him. In court, his mother came in with his birth certificate and his social security card. The judge looked at the birth certificate, determined that it was real. He was a U.S. citizen. The judge wanted to release him, but the prosecutor said, no, ICE wants to keep him in custody. And the judge said that she couldn't override what the federal government wanted to do. So you had this guy who was a citizen that they were holding in custody by ICE. And it was in Florida, and people threw a fit, and they finally released him. Now, you keep having right-wingers saying, well, you know, these people are gang members, and they're illegal, and they're here illegally, and blah, 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 blah. Serves them right, send them to El Salvador. This person was here as a person born in the United States. So what if they sent somebody like that to El Salvador, and then later they say, oh, we made a mistake. He's actually a citizen. He has every right to be here. But then they say, oh, but we can't get him back. We have no jurisdiction. I predict that's going to happen. I mean, we're very close to that right now. But as Piers Morgan said, it's absolutely ludicrous that Donald Trump couldn't just pick up the phone, call the president of El Salvador and say, hey, we want this person back. But they don't want to do that because this is a cruel administration and the cruelty is a major aspect of it. Like Pondering Politics is saying, Piers Morgan loves to suck up to Trump. On his show, Piers Morgan Uncensored, he's always bending over backwards for Donald Trump and fighting against anybody who's a Democrat or a progressive and on the left. But in this case, even Piers Morgan has to admit this is wrong. And one also thing that I wanted to say is I ran this through Pondering Politics because anytime I try to go directly to Bill Maher's channel to make a video, they always hit me with a copyright strike.
The administration quickly appealed her order, first to the federal appeals court based in Richmond, and then, when the intermediate court hadn't yet ruled, to the Supreme Court, which put the deadline on hold while it considered the case. The High Court on Thursday backed Zinnes' order, but did not give the administration a deadline for when Abrego Garcia should be returned, saying instead that the district court's judge's directive was unclear and needed clarification. Importantly, the Supreme Court noted that the clarification needed to be made with, quote, due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in conduct of foreign affairs. Hours later, Zinnes issued a new order for the government to, quote, take all available steps to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return and directed it to provide her with a sworn statement from an individual, quote, with personal knowledge of the steps the government has taken or is planning to take to secure his return. But attorneys with the Justice Department told the judge on Friday morning that they needed more time to provide the sworn declaration, blowing past 2 deadlines she gave the department to file it. She ruled later Friday that the administration, quote, failed to comply with her order for the information, saying it, quote, made no meaningful effort to comply. So again, here we have another. This is like the 3rd or 4th instance of the Trump administration in less than 3 months violating a district court order. Trump says he would bring Abrego Garcia back if the Supreme Court ordered it. Trump on Friday said that he would bring back Abrego Garcia if the Supreme Court ordered him to do so.
And I'm not going to have him go through the whole article here. If you want to go to the Pondering Politics channel, do that, and you can see this more in depth. But as we know, this was recorded a few days ago. So as we know, Donald Trump is defying the Supreme Court. So we're at a constitutional crisis here, and we've not really seen this in any of our lifetimes. So nobody really knows what's going to happen if the Supreme Court, really puts their feet down. And you got to wonder at this point, with the Supreme Court, they had the opportunity to keep Donald Trump off the ballot. And I wonder if they regret that now. And it was predictable. It was obvious that this was going to happen, that he was going to turn against them at some point. But I guess they're just like so many Americans, they didn't think it would happen to them. Let me know what you think about all this. Do you agree with, even if maybe you don't like Piers Morgan, and I'm not a big fan of him because I think he's incredibly disingenuous and always bends over backwards for Trump and the right-wingers. But even in this case, this is something so egregious that he has to go against it. Bill Maher is speaking out against this. Do you think Bill Maher and Piers Morgan are right? Let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. This is Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.